أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. How is everybody doing? I hope you're fine. You had good time yesterday and you managed to review the content that we covered in the last class. Welcome to the next class, inshallah. And today we want to continue with the project review, and we want to make sure that we understand how the project and the Arabs in those surahs work. So I think, inshallah, after this class, we will have done the project, hopefully speaking, depending on how intensively we go into details of the project. Thank you for joining again, inshallah. And let's begin the class. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen as always, and then we'll kickstart the class, inshallah. Give me a second. And here we go. You should be able to see my screen. If you can't, as always, please drop a message on WhatsApp. If you have any questions, please use WhatsApp group for the questions, and inshallah we'll take it from there. I'll keep an eye on the WhatsApp group that we have, and inshallah we should be able to answer your questions as much as we can. So last time what we did was we did the Arabs of the Surah Teen, which we went into quite much of a detail. You may be looking at it on your screens now. We did a lot of details in these Arabs, and we tried to understand how this is all coming together. So we developed this better understanding of this surah, and inshallah also keep in mind these details when we recite it next time, inshallah. And not only that, we just, once we understand how the surah is structured in terms of its grammatical structure and the words coming together, it's always good to go back and read the translation in that context, because that gives you that very personal and individual connection with the surah that you probably didn't have before, because now you understand kind of tone when the question is being asked, when the emphasis is being put on the surah and the ayah, for example. And inshallah, that if you keep on doing that exercise, you will inshallah find yourself in a very good place where you would be able to comprehend the ayahs of the Quran yourself. And personally, for myself, I try to target something before Ramadan normally kicks in. So what do I want to achieve before Ramadan kicks in? So we have Ramadan is in about 2.5 months time frame. So can we make some sort of objective for us that, okay, in this Ramadan, I want to be at a certain level before the Ramadan comes in, so I can make full use of Ramadan and I can connect to the Quran more than I usually do in Ramadan. So keep that in mind, inshallah, and we'll go through it. And we'll do some surahs today. The last two surahs, Surah Al-Qadr and the Surah Duha, inshallah, today. And let's see how far we go. Good. So let me start the class. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So, Surah Qadr, one of the very well-known surahs that we know. So what I want to do today is I just want to go through your project intensively, the remaining part, and make sure that we all understand. And on your end, you should listen to the lecture first. You should try to understand what we are discussing here, and probably as a next step to this class, spend your week to map what you did in the project and what we learned today, how we solved it in the class, and try to find those gaps. Where did you do something different? And it's fine if you have done something different, and if you believe that's incorrect or something, that's absolutely fine. But as far as you understand how the flow is going, how the surah is structured, and how the grammatical concepts are coming together, that's what you need. If you don't understand how it is happening when we are explaining this in this class, then probably you need to go back to some recordings and listen to those recordings and revise those concepts and come back here again, inshallah. So recordings are there for you. So let's begin with the surah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. Now, this is a surah I think every one of us knows, and you need to look at it very, very logically. So let's start with this side. Inna anzalna. Let's only look at this part. So we are clear what we're doing. Okay. Now, inna. What is inna? Now look at it. Inna. Inna. We did in the class. If you remember, what we did was, let me switch to the Word document. So what we did was we said there is a harf of nasab, which is in, which is inna. Okay. There is a harf of nasab, which is inna. Wait a second, please. Harf of nasab, which is inna. And there is an attached version of a pronoun, which is na. And when you combine them together, they become what? Inna. And we know in the harf of nasab means certainly, indeed, and na is us, we, right? Depending upon the context. So this is the exact same inna here. This is the exact same inna here. So what you're looking at is effectively a harf of nasab. This is a harf of nasab. Harf of nasab fragment. Right? You get that? We also did that in the class. There are in the Jumla Ismiya concept, when we studied the Jumla Ismiya, we learned that a mubtada can be two things. A mubtada can be, what can a mubtada be? Can you recall? Mubtada. Mubtada can either be a harf of nasab or an ism in rafa. Remember that? A mubtada can be a harf of nasab or an ism in rafa. So what we are finding here is a harf of nasab. So we can easily say, okay, this is harf of nasab, then it's the beginning of the Jumla Ismiya, so it is a mubtada. It's a mubtada. It's a mubtada that we have found here. Okay, and we said, okay, we know normally after harf of nasab we can find an invisible is at this point. We can find an invisible is usually, right? Which is correct, absolutely fine. And invisible is becomes important after harf of nasab when you don't have any other fi'l or verb. Is in itself is a fi'l to be, right? And if you don't have any other fi'l, then invisible is a fi'l that you use as something coming out of the after the mubtada, because the part before the mubtada, but the part before the invisible is mubtada, and the part before after the invisible is other parts of the Jumla Ismiya like khabar and muta'alliq bil khabar. So here we say, okay, there is an invisible is, because there is an inna here, which is mubtada. Right? But when we translate these ayahs, we don't necessarily have to translate is, because we need to see how it fits well in the English language context. So when we translate these ayahs, not always invisible is translated, depending upon what's coming after the invisible is. So now that we know the first part is the harf of nasab, and it's a mubtada, we move forward. We move further and we see anzalna. Now we find anzalna. What is anzalna? So look at it closely. So it looks like it's ending with a na. It's ending with a na. And I know something in the past tense that ends with a na. Do we know nasarna? Nasarna in the past tense chart? If we know nasarna, then you would be able to map it to the past tense fi'il. This is a past tense fi'il. And from now on, I'm going to try to use the terminology which is more Arabic in nature, so you get used to it. This is a fi'l madi, okay, past tense fi'l madi, and the inside pronoun of this fi'l madi is nahnu. Nahnu. How do we know it's nahnu? Because of this na ending. This is nahnu. Okay? Yeah. Just like nasarna. We had nasara for the huwa version. We have nasara for the huma version. We have nasaru for the hum version, and so on. If you remember the chart, you will end up in nasarna, which is the nahnu version. So it's like anzalna, which is a nahnu version of a past tense fi'l. So the inside pronoun is nahnu. So we get the fi'l, and we get the file, which is this nahnu. We get the fi'l and we get the file. And then there's a who in front of it. Inna anzalna hu. What is this who doing here? What is this who doing here? Now this who is an attached version of a pronoun huwa, if you remember. It's an attached version of a pronoun huwa, and we know that whenever a pronoun is attached to a fi'l, it is what status? It is what status? It's always nasab. It's always nasab. When it is attached to a fi'l, it's always nasab. Okay, so this is a attached version of a pronoun huwa, and because it's nasab, it's effectively a maf'ul. It's effectively a maf'ul. And what you have seen here is fi'il, fa'il, and maf'ul. It is the beginning of the jumla fi'iliya. This is the beginning of the jumla fi'iliya. This is where your jumla fi'iliya is beginning now. Because you have found the fi'il, you have found the maf'ul, and you have found the fa'il. Okay, you remember the parts of jumla fi'iliya? It was a fi'il, and then you must have a fa'il, which is normally inside doer, and then you have a maf'ul. Maf'ul is not mandatory, but the fail and file are mandatory. But this time you have found everything. And there was also something called muta'alliq bil fail. Okay, and let's see what else do we have. So because it's the starting of the jumla fi'liya, we are going forward in the same context of jumla fi'liya. Okay, when the fail comes in, the fail starts to say, oh, everything after me is also mine. I'm not going to give it to inna, which was the jumla ismiya. Yes, I'm not going to give it to inna, which was jumla ismiya. So this is where we started effectively the jumla ismiya. This is jumla ismiya because it started with inna. But after the jumla ismiya, after invisible is, we just ended up in the fail, a jumla fi'liya, which is beginning. Okay, we'll come to the jumla ismiya part again, inshallah. When we move forward, we find fi laylatil, and we probably all should know that this is jar majroor. This is jar majroor that you call harf of jar. This is a harf of jar fragment. You see this laylati is jar, so it's harf of jar fragment. We call it jar majroor. Jar majroor. This means majroor. Jar majroor. Okay. And moving forward, we find, okay, fi laylati, I understand it's jar majroor, but why is al-qadri in jar state? I know an ism is in jar state when it is either after the harf of jar or it's a mudaf ilay. Al-Qadr is not after the harf of jar because after the harf of jar is laylati. And harf of jars do not tolerate distance. So this fi cannot make al-Qadri jar. So the only option left is the mudaf ilay. Let's check if it is mudaf ilay. To make it mudaf ilay, you need to have laylati light. Is it light? Yes, it's light. It is light. Is there an al? No al. There's no al. There's no al to it. No al as well. And is it followed by jar? Yes, it's followed by jar. So this fragment, this entire bit for you becomes an idafa. idafa. Okay? Because there is a constant connection from fi to laylati, from laylati to al-qadr. You can't break this connection. So what you would do is, because we started as jar majroor, you would label all of this as jar majroor. All of this as jar majroor. Jar majroor. And because this is jar majroor, what happens when something is jar majroor in jumla fi'liya? What does it become? There is a fi'l, fa'il, maf'ul, and there is muta'alliq bil fi'l. There is muta'alliq bil fi'l. So this is the muta'alliq bil fi'l of the jumla fi'liya that started with anzalna. You see that? So everything here that you see, starting from anzalna all the way here, this part, all of this part, this is one jumla fi'liya. This is one jumla fi'liya. Now, zooming out a little bit, we did have inna, which was an ism, which was the harf of nasab, and it started the jumla ismiya. Now, what do we need in jumla ismiya? In jumla ismiya, we need a mubtada at least, which is mandatory, and we need one of the two, either a khabar or a muta'alliq bil khabar. And we don't see any of these here. We don't see a muta'alliq bil khabar, and we also don't see a khabar. So when that happens, what you do is you label the entire jumla fi'liya as the khabar of inna, as the khabar of inna. So this is a khabar of this inna, and as a whole, this entire thing is effectively a jumla ismiya. This is a jumla ismiya. Okay, you understand? This is jumla ismiya. Such khabars that you, for example, if you have labeled a jumla fi'liya as a khabar, sometimes the terminology used in Arabic is called fi mahalli khabar. Fi mahalli khabar. That means it is in place of a khabar. It is in place of a khabar. This is where the khabar was expected, but the jumla fi'liya pops up. Therefore, it is in place of a khabar. Okay, fi mahalli khabar. Okay, good. Let's move forward. Now, inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. Qadr. Wama adraka. Wama adraka. Okay. Now, we know wa is either a connector. We know wa is either a connector or a harf of jar. Okay, and you would find this, and ma, we know today, we know ma is ism mawsul. Okay, but in future, inshallah, we'll know ma is a lot more than ism mawsul as well, and this is one of the examples. So wama adraka laylatul qadr. Wama adraka ma laylatul qadr. So this wow is acting as a connector here. It's a connector. It's a connector here. Okay, it is connecting, and we know ma means, we know ma as ism mawsul today. So I'm going to explain you a few things from that context. This is what ism mawsul is translated as, what or whatever. Okay, this one, ma is translated as what or whatever. So because it is translated as what, it can also be used for questioning. For questioning. So ism mawsul, if it is an ism mawsul, it immediately needs its sila, which is to, in order to complete its meaning. Because you know ism mawsul, that's why I'm telling you this way. But effectively, this is an interrogative ism. It's called istifham. It's an interrogation. It's a question. It's a question. What? What? Okay. And if you just leave it at what, you don't understand what we are talking about here, because you need something else to complete this question, right? And that something else is this part. This part. this entire part that's coming after it. Okay, and we try to analyze adraka. If you look at adraka, you would possibly be able to differentiate the ka and adra, because ka is an attached pronoun. It's an attached pronoun of anta. Okay, and adra. What is adra? Adra, nasara. Can you map it? Adra, nasara. But what we know from nasara is we don't have this alif. We don't have this alif in nasara, do we? We have a fatha. We have a fatha, but we don't have this alif normally. So where is this alif coming from? Let me tell you. This is a bit advanced concept, but let me give you an insight into this, so you know what we're talking about. So what's happening here is the following. So the word is dara. The word is dara. This is the word dara. Okay. When it transforms itself based on some surf concepts that we are going to inshallah study in this course, it becomes adra. You have to trust me on that, okay? Because you don't know how this is happening. So inshallah, once we study this, you will understand this. It becomes adra. This is one of the surf patterns that transforms this fi'l from dara into adra. Okay, this is called family 4, and we'll inshallah study that. And when you have to attach a pronoun, there are two ways of attaching a pronoun, right? One way is you just attach it like that, adra, and you have this alif maksura, and then you say ka. Ka. This is one way of attaching a pronoun. The other way of attaching a pronoun is you just take the same word, adra. Instead of alif maksura, it's after all an alif, you just write an alif. And then you attach a pronoun. It's just the way it's written once in a while. Some scripts write it differently from others. Okay, so here in this script, it is written as alif, but that's not the alif coming from the huma form. Nasara, nasara, if you remember, the huma had the alif in the end. But this is not that alif. This is the alif because it was a alif maksura. So the better representation of alif maksura is alif. You understand? So that's why it still is a huwa form, not the huma form. Okay, you have to keep that in mind here. And I know this may have been a bit advanced in your project because you have not studied this. And if you have even labeled it as huma, that's absolutely fine, because that tells you that you're able to identify difference between the nasara and nasara, which is absolutely fine. That's great. If you have labeled it that way, it's absolutely okay. Just to give you an insight into this font a little bit, into the way it is written. Let me show you how it is written here. Let's quickly check how it is written here. Surah 13 was wait a second, 95. Okay. Not teen, sorry, Surah Qadr. I'm looking at the wrong surah. What's happening? Okay. Here it is also written like that. If you change the font, I don't know if you change the font. Let's see what we have. Simple. We say Usmani. You see this? You see this? It has changed now. It has changed now. See this form. The alif is gone now. It is the different way of attaching the same pronoun. Okay, it's just a form thing. So in a simple way to make it cleaner, it just keep it alif. Okay, so there's nothing too complex here. So we know this is a jumla fi'liya because it is a past tense fi'l. It is a past tense fi'l. It's a fi'l madhi. It's a past tense fi'l with the inside pronoun huwa. with the inside pronoun huwa. So this begins the jumla fi'liya. And ant and ka is the attached version of anta. And when an attached pronoun attached to a fi'l, it is nasab. It is nasab. Okay? So this becomes a maf'ul. Right? This becomes a maf'ul. Then we move forward again. And you find another ma. And now this ma is another istifham, interrogative. It's question ma. It is questioning ma. It's questioning what. What? And because it's an ism mawsul, this is where jumla failure ended already. This is where your jumla failure finished. Already finished. Okay, and now this is a new ism that is popping up, and there is no reason to call it nasab or jar, because it's an independent ism and there's nothing making it nasab or jar. So the default status of rafa is mapped to it, because it's an inflexible ism. It will never show you the status based on the harakas. So after the rafa, it becomes a mubtada, because in jumla ismiya, it's the beginning of jumla ismiya. Rafa is a mubtada, and moving forward, you find Laylatul Qadri. It's an ism which is light with no al. No al. It's an ism which is light with no al, and it is followed by jar. So this part gives you an idafa. And idafa is a khabar. It's a khabar of this jumla ismiya. Of this jumla ismiya. Okay? Gives you khabar of this jumla ismiya. Wama adraka ma laylatul qadri. Laylatul qadri. Now, this is where Allah is questioning, and what would you know? What is Laylatul Qadr? So if you start from here, so inna anzalnahu fi laylatul qadr. Certainly we sent it down in the night of the power. In the night of the power. Okay, and what would you know? What would you know? What is the night of power? And now Allah is answering that question, giving an answer and explaining what is that night of power. Okay, Laylatul Qadri. Now again, this is the same connection. Laylatul, light, no al, followed by jar. This is an idafa. This is idafa. You understand? This is idafa. You see how it's idafa? Now, because it's idafa, we have to look at the first ism as well. It's in rafa state. It's in rafa, and the last one is in jar, and there's a connection between them. You can't separate them because it's idafa. Now, as soon as you see ism in rafa state, there's a highly likely chance that it's a mubtada, because there's no fail before it. There's no fail before it that makes it a file, and there is nothing before it that gives us a justification why it is actually rafa, because the default status is rafa, and is the first ism we find in rafa state. We will label it as a mubtada at the same time. This is not just the idafa, but also the mubtada. This entire idafa is actually the mubtada, because you cannot break this chain. You just can't separate these two words. So this mubtada starts the jumla ismiya, because mubtada is in jumla ismiya. It starts the jumla ismiya. And in jumla ismiya, you need what? Khabar, muta'alliq bil khabar, at least one of the two, right? And khabar is in rafa form, and you find immediately after an ism in rafa, which becomes its khabar. Laylatul Qadr. And after mubtada, you also know there's an invisible is. You understand? So we have done the invisible is concept. We said invisible is after ism in rafa, and also in the after the harf of nasab. But and you may be thinking, okay, this is not ism in rafa, this is ism in jar, which is al-qadri. Why don't we put invisible is after laylatu? And the reason for that is you can't put something in the middle of the fragment. You have to take the whole fragment and then you put something. If you put something in the middle of the fragment, then you're actually breaking the fragment. So you can't break the fragment. You just have to put it after the fragment, so the fragment is not impacted. Okay, so you take the Laylatul Qadr as your mubtada and then you put an is, because it also makes sense. As we know, mubtada is a part before is. This is before is, and khabar is a part which is after is. Khabar is a part which is after is. Yes? Khabar and muta'alliq bil khabar. Now we find khairun, which is khabar. We go forward. We say min alfi. And immediately we see min alfi is a jar majroor. It's a harf of jar. Ba ta kaf lam waw min pm. Min alfi. Min alfi. It's a jar majroor. Okay? It's a jar majroor. Then we take a look at alfi a bit more closely, and we find alfi is light. It's light, and it has no al. And is it followed by jar? Yes, it is followed by jar. Okay, so min alfi is harf of jar fragment, but alfi shahri is an idafa. So this entire fragment is connected together. This entire fragment is connected together. You see that? Min is connected to alfi, and alfi is connected to shahri. Shahrin. Okay? So you can't separate them. You can't break these chains. So because min alfi was jar majroor and everything is connected, we call this entire thing a muta'alliq bil khabar. Muta'alliq bil khabar, because if you find a jar majroor in a jumla ismiya, it is a muta'alliq bil khabar. Okay? Good. So you have this full jumla ismiya here, where you have these parts completely separately identified. This is three elements. This is the mubtada, this is khabar, and this is muta'alliq bil khabar. Okay? This is jumla ismiya.